Imagine facing a challenge that seems utterly insurmountable, an obstacle that, by all laws of logic and physics, appears impossible to overcome. Are you familiar with that feeling when all efforts are in vain and the adversary or problem seems unconquerable? We've all been in situations where there seems to be no way out, and conventional methods only worsen the predicament. But what if we told you that even the most impregnable barriers can be broken if you change the rules of the game? How do you breach a defense that was called invincible? What do you do when conventional methods prove useless? And what secret lay hidden behind impregnable walls that could change the tide of an entire battle? Today, we will delve into a story where a genius of defense met a genius of adaptation and show how one seemingly minor detail revolutionized all notions of warfare, leaving the world to ask, quote one, prepare to discover how what seemed immutable crumbled under the onslaught of unpredictability. On February 19th, 1945, 8 miles southeast of Japan's shores, on the island of Iwo Jima, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi stood in his command bunker. His sanctuary was surrounded by 3-foot-thick reinforced concrete walls, a bastion designed for absolute invulnerability. Above him, like giant honeycombs, 500 similar fortifications riddled the volcanic rock. Each was built to withstand the most powerful American bombing strike of its time. For months, Allied shells rained down on these concrete strongholds. Direct hits, capable of leveling entire buildings, barely scratched their surfaces. Japanese soldiers, protected by these structures, proudly called them invincible. American Marines, conversely, viewed them as deadly traps, harbingers of inevitable doom. Every frontal assault attempted before had ended the same way. Waves of Marines were mown down by fire, never reaching the bunker entrances. The defenders' calculation was simple and brutal. 20,000 Japanese defenders, an unlimited supply of ammunition, and perfectly calibrated fields of fire. However, that morning something rolled onto the black sand beaches that was in no Japanese intelligence report. 8 M4A3 Sherman tanks. At first glance, they looked entirely ordinary, except for one detail the defenders couldn't discern from their concrete fortresses. These tanks did not carry shells. They were equipped with pressurized napalm tanks, capable of spewing 100 yards of liquid fire on demand. The Japanese had created an ideal defense against everything they knew about American warfare tactics. They had no idea the Marines were about to completely change the rules. Stay with us and watch till the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The pre-dawn gloom of February 19th, 1945, enveloped Iwo Jima in a deceptive, unsettling calm. Captain David Shoup, hunched in a cramped landing craft, took one last look at the reconnaissance photographs. The images show the outlines of what Allied commanders called the most formidable defensive position in the entire Pacific theater. A volcanic island transformed into an impregnable concrete citadel. 500 pillboxes, bunkers, and gun emplacements, carved directly into the rock and reinforced with steel, formed a single, deadly organism. Each position was interconnected, creating overlapping fields of fire, capable of annihilating attacking forces from multiple directions simultaneously. Shoup carefully folded the photos and tucked them behind his field jacket. Around him, Marines from K Company checked their weapons with the mechanical precision of men who knew precisely what awaited them. The preliminary bombardment, the most powerful in the history of the Pacific Theater, had lasted 74 days of continuous shelling, turning the island's surface into a crater-pocked lunar landscape. Nevertheless, aerial reconnaissance revealed an alarming truth. The bunkers remained intact. 3 feet of reinforced concrete had withstood shelling that would have leveled entire city blocks, leaving them virtually unscathed. 800 yards from the shore, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi emerged from his command bunker to survey the American fleet gathering in the pre-dawn gloom. 900 vessels stretched across the horizon, their silhouettes black against the starry sky, presaging the imminent invasion. Kuribayashi had spent 8 months meticulously preparing for this moment, transforming Iwo Jima into what he considered an impregnable fortress. His engineers had tunneled 11 miles of tunnels connecting the defensive positions, allowing troops to move undetected between bunkers, remaining invisible to the enemy. Artillery pieces were positioned in caves carved deep into the volcanic rock, securely protected from counter-battery fire by tons of stone overhead. The Japanese general had meticulously studied American tactics during his previous assignment in the United States. He perfectly understood their preference for overwhelming firepower, followed by direct infantry assault. His defensive system was designed to neutralize both of these advantages. The bunkers were to withstand the bombardment and then decimate infantry assaults with concentrated machine gun and artillery fire. It was a simple, proven, and mathematically precise plan. At precisely 09 Ausumzers, the engines of the landing craft roared to life, shattering the silence. Shoup felt the deck vibrate under his boots as the Higgins boat surged towards the black sand beaches. The preliminary bombardment had ceased, leaving behind an eerie silence now broken only by the roar of diesel engines and churning water. According to intelligence, the Marines faced the bloodiest assault in the Corps' history. Standard tactics called for an artillery barrage, followed by an infantry advance supported by conventional tanks. Every Marine in the landing craft understood the brutal arithmetic of bunker warfare. Attackers required overwhelming numerical superiority to overcome such heavily fortified positions. The first wave landed on the beach at 9:30. Machine gun fire erupted from concealed positions, mowing down Marines before they could advance past the surf line. Mortar shells fell with deadly accuracy across the landing zone. Each explosion sent geysers of black sand and shrapnel tearing through the attacking ranks. Shoup watched his men dive for cover behind scattered debris, pinned down just 50 yards from the surf. The bunkers had withstood the bombardment exactly as Kuribayashi had predicted. From his command post, the Japanese general monitored radio transmissions with grim satisfaction. His defensive plan was working perfectly. American casualties mounted with every passing minute, while his own forces remained protected in their concrete shelters. The interconnected fields of fire prevented any significant advance, forcing the Marines to cluster in kill zones where artillery could devastate entire units. This was the battle Kuribayashi had prepared for. A grueling war of attrition designed to bleed the Americans dry. But there was something different about this assault. Something intangible that didn't fit into his ironclad calculations. Behind the initial waves of infantry, 8 unusual Sherman tanks rolled off specialized landing craft onto the volcanic sand. These M4A3s, from a distance, looked identical to standard armor, but closer inspection revealed critical modifications. Where conventional tanks mounted 75mm guns, these machines carried flamethrower equipment connected to massive fuel tanks. The flamethrower mechanism could project burning liquid up to 100 yards, far enough to hit bunker entrances from positions outside the effective range of Japanese small arms fire. Sergeant Walter Lutz commanded the lead flamethrower tank, his crew crammed inside the steel hull with 400 gallons of napalm, pressurized at 800 pounds per square inch. The Marines called these machines Zippo tanks, a sardonic nod to the popular lighter. Lutz had trained extensively with the flamethrower system, learning to coordinate fuel delivery and ignition timing for maximum effect. The weapon was devastatingly effective against fortified positions, but came with significant risks. The fuel tanks turned each machine into a potential bomb, and the limited range required crews to advance into enemy kill zones, making them vulnerable. Imagine this. You've spent months building an impregnable fortress, concrete and steel, designed to withstand any assault. You are confident in your safety, in your tactics, and suddenly, in an instant, all of it turns to dust, or rather, to infernal flames. How is this possible? And what if what seemed immutable was merely an illusion? For decades, military doctrine asserted, a bunker is the pinnacle of defensive engineering, but on one of the bloodiest battlefields of World War II, Iwo Jima, this axiom was mercilessly disproven. Today, we delve into the history of a weapon that revolutionized the perception of warfare and learn how it changed the course of a battle that seemed hopeless. We will tell you how engineers created this monster, how it worked, and why the Japanese general, hitherto unwavering, first felt the cold touch of doubt. Stay with us and watch till the end to discover all the details of this astonishing story. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription, and of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The Japanese defenders, trained to fanaticism, had never encountered anything like it. Their intelligence was silent about fire-spewing machines. Their defensive positions, designed to repel conventional attacks, were powerless against what was coming. As Sergeant Lutz's tank moved toward the first bunker complex, the machine gunners inside the concrete walls prepared for another engagement with a conventional Sherman. How many such attacks had they already repelled? Dozens. Their tactics were practiced to automatic precision. Let the tank get closer, then concentrate fire on its vision slits and tracks. But that day, everything went wrong. At a distance of about 70 yards from the target, Lutz gave the order. A stream of burning fuel erupted from the flamethrower nozzle, streaking through the morning air like liquid lightning. The napalm struck directly into the bunker's embrasure, surging inside and instantly filling the concrete chamber with flames, reaching temperatures exceeding 1100 degrees Celsius. The Japanese soldiers inside had no time to comprehend what was happening, let alone escape. The reinforced concrete that had, moments ago, protected them from artillery turned into a deadly oven, trapping superheated air and toxic smoke. In a matter of seconds, the impregnable position was neutralized. The Marines who had been pinned down by fire from that bunker were suddenly able to advance. But the tactical advantage was nothing compared to the psychological shock. Across the battlefield, Japanese soldiers watched in horror as their most formidable fortifications erupted in flames. The concrete walls they had trusted with their lives proved utterly useless against this new weapon. What happened next? How did Kuribayashi, the Japanese general, react to this? He couldn't believe his eyes. Stay with us to discover how this weapon changed his strategy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. General Kuribayashi received the first reports with deep disbelief. Bunkers that had withstood relentless bombardments and artillery barrages for months were now being eliminated in mere moments by individual tanks. His meticulously constructed defensive system, based on centuries-old principles of fortification warfare, was literally crumbling under the assault of a weapon he had never seen, nor could have imagined. The Americans had changed the fundamental nature of bunker warfare, and all his preparation suddenly proved inadequate. For the first time since arriving on Iwo Jima, the Japanese general felt the cold touch of doubt, a harbinger of impending collapse. But how did the Americans come to create such a weapon? And why did Japanese intelligence know nothing of such destructive power? The concept of mounting flamethrowers on tanks was born not from long-term strategic planning, but from desperate battlefield necessity. 6 months earlier, Marine Corps engineers at Quantico anxiously watched infantry casualties mount during the assaults on Pacific Islands. It became clear that conventional weapons could not effectively neutralize deeply entrenched Japanese bunker systems. Colonel Robert Blake, head of the Marine Corps Equipment Board, after reviewing shocking casualty reports from Saipan and Guam, authorized experimentation with flamethrower systems. Standard infantry flamethrowers had a range of only 35 yards and required soldiers to approach enemy positions within grenade-throwing distance, which was tactically suicidal against well-defended fortifications. The solution lay in scaling up existing technologies. The Navy's Bureau of Ships had developed flamethrower equipment for clearing beach obstacles, using pressurized fuel delivery systems capable of projecting burning liquid significantly farther. Blake's engineers masterfully adapted this naval equipment for installation on M4A3 Sherman tanks, creating unique hybrid machines that combined robust armor protection with truly devastating firepower. But how exactly did a conventional tank transform into a fire-breathing dragon? And what technical marvels were involved in this process? The modification process required radical intervention. Removing the tank's main 75mm gun and replacing it with a specialized flamethrower nozzle connected to massive fuel tanks installed inside the vehicle. Captain Robert McVeigh oversaw the conversion of the first 8 prototypes at the Mare Island Naval Shipyard in December 1944. Each such tank carried a colossal 400 gallons of napalm fuel, a mixture of gasoline thickened with polystyrene to create a substance that burns significantly longer and adhered to surfaces much more effectively than pure gasoline. The fuel system operated under pressure, generated by compressed nitrogen cylinders, allowing crews to project flames up to 100 yards with enough accuracy to hit bunker embrasures from relatively safe positions. The flamethrower itself was a marvel of engineering and precision. The nozzle assembly featured adjustable flow controls that allowed crews to vary the flame's intensity, from narrow, precise streams for pinpoint targeting to wide, voluminous blasts for area denial. Ignition was provided by pilot burners fed by a separate fuel system, ensuring reliable ignition even in the harshest combat conditions. The entire system could provide continuous fire for 90 seconds or deliver approximately 30 individual, powerful bursts of flame, depending on duration and intensity settings. Creating a weapon is one thing, but how do you use it effectively in combat? What tactics were developed for these fiery machines? Captain McVeigh insisted on extensive and comprehensive crew training before these unique machines were deployed to combat. Tank crews had to master the intricate fuel system, practice flamethrower techniques, and learn tactical procedures that fundamentally differed from conventional armor tactics. Unlike standard tanks, which engaged targets at maximum range, flamethrower tanks required close coordination with advancing infantry and meticulous positioning to maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. The machines were particularly vulnerable to artillery and anti-tank weapons due to their immense fuel reserves and the necessity of operating at relatively short distances. The tactical doctrine for flamethrower tanks evolved through trial and error during intensive training exercises. McVeigh's crews learned to coordinate their attacks with advancing infantry, using conventional tanks for long-range fire support, while flamethrower tanks eliminated specific, critical targets impeding infantry movement. The most effective technique involved approaching bunkers at oblique angles that maximized concealment during the tank's approach until the final assault phase, when speed and surprise could overcome defensive fire. Sergeant Lutz, whom we mentioned earlier, proved to be the most proficient flamethrower tank commander during training, demonstrating an intuitive grasp of flamethrower tactics that impressed even his instructors. His crew, driver Private Johnson, gunner Corporal Martinez, and loader Private Davis, practiced bunker assault procedures until they could execute complex maneuvers without a single spoken command. The coordination required among crew members exceeded that required for conventional tank operations. And finally, the most crucial question: how did this weapon impact morale? Could training prepare soldiers for the true terror of the flames? Since flamethrowing required precise timing and positioning, allowing no margin for error, the psychological impact of the flamethrower tanks was impossible to predict during training exercises. No amount of preparation could simulate the terror flamethrower weapons instilled in enemy soldiers, or the incredible boost to Allied morale when previously impregnable positions suddenly became vulnerable. Intelligence reports from the European theater suggested that German forces often abandoned their positions rather than face flamethrower attacks. However, the conditions of the Pacific Theater presented different challenges due to fanatical Japanese defensive tactics and cultural factors that made surrender extremely rare. These tanks changed not only tactics, but the very nature of warfare in the Pacific, leaving an indelible mark on history. They became a symbol of adaptation and ingenuity in situations where conventional methods proved useless. Have you ever considered that the simplest things can turn out to be the deadliest? That ordinary fuel, in the hands of inventive engineers, transforms into something capable of changing the course of an entire battle? Today's story is dedicated to precisely such a phenomenon: flamethrower tanks. We will delve into the history of these machines that changed the face of war and reveal how they became both a marvel of engineering and the embodiment of terror. How did these steel monsters overcome their own limitations? And why did their appearance come as a genuine shock to the enemy? Prepare to learn how one tank modification forced a complete rethinking of battlefield tactics, and why just a few such machines proved capable of what was beyond the capability of entire battalions. Stay with us and watch till the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Operating flamethrower tanks necessitated an entire supporting infrastructure. Each vehicle consumed fuel at an incredible rate, far exceeding that of conventional ammunition. Just one day of intense combat was enough to completely deplete a tank's fuel tanks, forcing frequent and risky resupply operations under enemy fire. The napalm mixture itself required special storage and handling conditions, significantly complicating frontline logistics. Furthermore, the compressed nitrogen system, responsible for propelling the flamethrower mixture, needed regular maintenance and pressure checks to ensure reliable performance in combat. The traditional Marine Corps doctrine always emphasized a combination of firepower and mobility. However, flamethrower tanks represented a significant departure from these established tactical principles. These machines sacrificed long-range combat capability and reduced their conventional ammunition load for a single, highly specialized task: bunker destruction. Such compromises forced commanders to re-evaluate fundamental concepts of armored vehicle employment, particularly regarding tank-infantry cooperation in assault operations. Conventional wisdom dictated that tanks should provide fire support from positions that maximized their armor protection and firing range. Yet, flamethrower tanks required aggressive positioning, which inevitably exposed them to concentrated enemy fire. The decision to deploy only 8 flamethrower tanks on Iwo Jima reflected both resource limitations and uncertainty regarding their effectiveness in real combat conditions. Marine Corps planners allocated limited cargo space for this experimental weapon, prioritizing proven systems over unverified innovations. These 8 tanks comprised the entire operational flamethrower vehicle fleet available to the Pacific Fleet Marines, making their performance critically important for future flamethrower weapon development programs. The technical specifications of the M4A3 flamethrower tank variant included armor thickness ranging from 25 to 76 mm, depending on the specific section. This provided protection against small arms fire and shell fragments, but left the vehicle vulnerable to anti-tank weapons and direct artillery hits. The tank's weight increased from 33 to 37 tons due to fuel system modifications, resulting in reduced mobility and increased ground pressure, especially on soft surfaces like sand. Engine power remained sufficient for tactical movements, but fuel consumption significantly rose due to the added weight and the increased power demands of the flamethrower system. The flamethrower nozzle could traverse 30 degrees left or right from the tank's central axis, with an elevation adjustment from 10 to plus 120 degrees. This limited traverse angle required extremely precise positioning to engage targets, as the tank's hull had to be oriented toward the target area before effective flamethrowing was possible. Crew visibility was also significantly restricted compared to conventional tanks due to modifications needed for the fuel system installation, making coordination with supporting infantry vital for situational awareness and target identification. Private First Class Hiroshi Shigeta, crouched deep within Bunker Complex 7:25, watched tensely as American tanks slowly advanced across the battlefield. This field had been prepared for months by his unit, transforming it into an impregnable fortress. The thick concrete walls around him, 3 feet in depth, were reinforced with steel rods and designed to withstand direct hits even from battleship guns. His Type 96 machine gun was positioned to cover the main approach route with interlocking fire from adjacent positions, ensuring no enemy could cross the open ground without heavy casualties. Everything proceeded as planned until the lead American tank stopped approximately 75 yards away and pointed something at him that looked nothing like a gun barrel. The stream of liquid fire that erupted from Lutz's tank transformed the battlefield in a way no tactical manual could have predicted. Shigeta watched as the burning fuel pierced the air like molten lightning, striking his bunker's embrasure with the force of a dragon's breath. The napalm slammed against the concrete and steel, then poured through the opening like flaming water, instantly filling the chamber with flames exceeding 2,000 degrees. The reinforced walls that had protected him from months of artillery bombardment suddenly became a furnace, trapping superheated air and poisonous smoke. Shigeta's screams lasted less than 3 seconds before the inferno consumed all the oxygen in the confined space. Captain Shoup witnessed the complete annihilation of the bunker from his position, 50 yards behind the tank assault line. The concrete structure, which had held 2 platoons of Marines pinned down for 3 hours, simply erupted in flames, then suddenly fell silent. No more machine gun fire. No more mortar rounds whistling over the beach. The position, identified by intelligence as a key defensive strongpoint, had been neutralized by a single 8-second burst of flame. Shoup grabbed his radio and demanded immediate coordination between the remaining flamethrower tanks and his infantry companies. If this weapon could destroy bunkers so effectively, the entire tactical situation on Iwo Jima was about to change. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Lutz traversed his tank's turret 10 degrees to the left and identified his next target. A reinforced pillbox housing a 75mm anti-tank gun that controlled the main approach route to the island's interior. The Japanese position was constructed from 5 feet of reinforced concrete on all sides, with steel plates protecting the gun's embrasure. Conventional tank fire bounced off the structure without effect, and an infantry assault was impossible due to interlocking fields of fire from supporting positions. Lutz ordered his driver to advance 20 yards closer, reducing the effective range to 60 yards for maximum flame penetration. The anti-tank gun crew inside the pillbox had never encountered flamethrower weapons. Their training focused on identifying armored vehicles and procedures for engaging conventional tanks, with tactics based on precise gun laying and ammunition selection for various target types. As Lutz's tank approached their position, Gunner Corporal Yamamoto prepared to engage what appeared to be a standard Sherman at optimal range. The flamethrower nozzle was not immediately recognizable as a weapon system, and Japanese intelligence had provided no information about American flamethrower tanks. Yamamoto was adjusting his gun's elevation when the world around him suddenly erupted into liquid fire. A stream of napalm struck the gun embrasure with devastating accuracy, pouring through the opening and coating every surface inside the pillbox with burning fuel that clung with equal tenacity to concrete, steel, and human flesh. The gun crew perished instantly, overcome by superheated gases that scorched their lungs before they could even draw a breath. Imagine this. You've poured all your effort and resources into creating something unyielding, something you believed would withstand any trial. You built for months, meticulously planning every detail, every line of defense. And then, in a single, terrifying instant, it all turns to ash, becoming a useless pile of charred metal engulfed in flames that will rage for hours. An entire position that controlled a key strategic approach was obliterated in less than 10 seconds. How could this have happened? How could a weapon, dismissed by many as a mere experimental curiosity, change the course of an entire military campaign overnight? Why did the strongest, most meticulously planned fortifications, built with months of arduous labor, crumble in mere moments, leaving behind only ash and terror? And what unimaginable psychological impact did this new, monstrous weapon have on those forced to confront it face to face, with no idea how to counter such a threat? We've all found ourselves in situations where meticulously crafted plans crumbled overnight, when all efforts seemed futile in the face of something entirely new and unpredictable. That feeling of powerlessness, when what you considered your greatest defense turns against you, is familiar to many. But there's always a way out, a way to adapt and overcome what seemed insurmountable. In this video, we will unveil the incredible story of a tactical innovation that not only changed the outcome of one of the most ferocious battles, but also offered new lessons in understanding conflict dynamics and innovation. We will show how conventional notions of warfare were shattered and why this still resonates in modern strategy. Stay with us and watch until the end, as many more astonishing details await you. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Coordinating these formidable machines, led by an officer like McVeigh, was a truly monumental task. The remaining 7 flamethrower tanks advanced slowly but relentlessly across the sticky volcanic sand of the beach, each vehicle heading toward predetermined targets, selected in close coordination with infantry unit commanders. The tactical deployment of these fire-breathing behemoths demanded exceptional integration with supporting forces. Despite their destructive power, the tanks remained vulnerable to enemy attacks during the approach phase. They required robust infantry protection to prevent desperate attempts by Japanese soldiers to get close and use satchel charges or magnetic mines in close combat. In practice, however, this coordination proved far more challenging than in training, as radio communication constantly deteriorated in real combat conditions, and thick smoke from blazing positions significantly hampered visual signals. The psychological effect of these fiery attacks spread like wildfire throughout the Japanese defensive network, engulfing the entire island. Soldiers, who had diligently constructed what they believed were impregnable fortifications over many months, now watched in horror as their strongest bunkers instantly erupted in flames and fell silent forever in a matter of seconds. The monolithic concrete walls they had entrusted their lives to offered no protection against this new, terrifying weapon, capable of penetrating through embrasures like molten liquid. Radio messages from forward positions described American tanks spewing fire like mythical dragons, triggering a wave of panic among the defenders. They had prepared for traditional warfare, but were confronted with something far beyond their experience or any possible training. It was an absolute paradigm shift, a challenge to everything they knew about war. General Kuribayashi, in his command bunker deep beneath Mount Suribachi, tracked the tactical situation with growing alarm. Increasingly desperate radio messages poured in from his forward commanders. The American advance was progressing at an incredible speed that none of the scenarios his staff had wargamed had anticipated. Defensive positions, calculated to hold for days, were falling within hours. Flamethrower tanks were destroying bunkers with such rapidity that his reserves simply couldn't reinforce threatened sectors in time. His meticulously constructed defense system, designed to channel American attacks into predetermined killing zones, was collapsing before his eyes. The tanks were breaching the very positions that formed the core of his entire strategy, leaving behind only chaos and destruction. Stay with us and watch until the end, as many more astonishing details await you. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The tactical success of the flamethrower tanks, however, also created new challenges for Marine commanders. Infantry companies, which had been pinned down for hours under relentless fire, suddenly found they could rapidly advance across terrain that had recently been impassable due to continuous machine gun fire. This dizzying speed of breakthrough threatened to outpace artillery support and logistical resupply, potentially creating isolated pockets of Marines deep in enemy territory. To prevent such a development, Shoup coordinated with battalion headquarters, aiming to synchronize the advance rates of conventional tanks and artillery with those of the flamethrower vehicles, thereby maintaining vital mutual support among all weapon systems. This was a complex task demanding constant attention and flexibility. Private Davis, one of Lutz's tank crew members, and his loader, was at that moment supplying compressed nitrogen to the fuel system while carefully monitoring the gauges that indicated the remaining flame-throwing capacity. Each powerful burst of napalm consumed approximately 12 gallons of fuel, and the tank's total capacity of 400 gallons allowed for about 30 individual flamethrower attacks before critical resupply was needed. The logistics of operating these fiery machines differed fundamentally from those of conventional armored units, as fuel consumption here significantly outstripped ammunition expenditure. Davis, intently watching the instruments, calculated that his tank had enough fuel for 6 more bunker attacks before needing to return to the beach for refueling. The next question was, what would be the target for these final 6 attacks? The third bunker complex, which became Lutz's next target, concealed a crucial communications center deep within its confines. This center coordinated defensive fire for the entire southeastern sector of the island. Japanese radio operators inside this reinforced structure maintained continuous contact with artillery batteries skillfully positioned in caves across the volcanic terrain. They directed counter-battery fire against American positions and coordinated defensive movements between isolated strongpoints. The destruction of this single facility would blind Kuribayashi's forces in a critical sector of the battlefield, dismantling the very command and control system that held his entire defensive network together. It was a key node. Its loss could prove fatal. Corporal Martinez, the tank's flamethrower system operator, surgically adjusted the projector's nozzle for maximum flame penetration. He then initiated the ignition sequence. Pilot lights, powered by a separate propane system designed to ensure reliable flame generation even in the harshest combat conditions, flickered on. The fuel pressure gauge showed optimal operating parameters, and the traverse mechanism aligned the projector with the target bunker's main antenna. Everything was ready for the decisive strike. Martinez decisively pulled the trigger. A powerful, pressurized stream of napalm shot across 60 yards of volcanic sand before slamming into the bunker entrance with the force of concentrated hellfire. The communication center literally exploded in flames, which instantly reached every corner of the underground structure, destroying thousands of dollars worth of radio equipment and eliminating all technical personnel who had maintained contact with Japanese artillery positions across the island. The loss of this single position disrupted defense coordination over square miles of territory, leaving isolated bunkers to fight independently without mutual support or coordinated fire missions. This was not merely a physical blow. It was a strike against the nervous system of the defense. The tactical impact of this breakthrough far exceeded mere physical destruction. Kuribayashi's ability to respond promptly to American advances deteriorated with each communication node destroyed by a flamethrower attack. By 1400 hours on the first day of the assault, the 8 flamethrower tanks had destroyed 27 bunkers, pillboxes, and other defensive positions that had originally been designated as primary targets for the entire first week of operations. This breakthrough surpassed all planned estimates, creating unprecedented opportunities for rapid exploitation of the success achieved, threatening to collapse all Japanese resistance in the southern part of the island. A weapon that just hours earlier had been considered merely an experimental system proved devastatingly effective against fortifications that until then had been deemed absolutely impregnable. What future awaited those who dared to stand in the path of these fiery dragons? Imagine a weapon meant to be the key to victory, an unyielding force capable of pulverizing any defense. You believe in its power, you rely on it, and then it transforms into a fireball, entombing the crew in a matter of seconds. How is this possible? And what does it mean for those inside when their invincible machine suddenly becomes their greatest threat? Stay with us and watch until the end, because every moment of this story is filled with incredible details. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And, of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're very interested to learn the geography of our viewers. Today, we will delve into one of the most brutal chapters of World War II, the Battle of Iwo Jima. Here, American flamethrower tanks, intended to be a terror to Japanese fortifications, suddenly encountered an unforeseen threat. What decisions did commanders make to save their crews? How did psychological pressure change the course of the battle? And why did this seemingly invincible weapon prove so fragile that its crew lived in constant fear? Stay with us and watch until the end, because every moment of this story is filled with incredible details. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're very interested to learn the geography of our viewers. We will reveal how Japanese General Kuribayashi, confronted with this new American threat, devised a brilliant tactic in just 48 hours that transformed the Marine Corps' most formidable weapon into a deadly trap. Prepare to discover how he did it and what lessons both sides learned from this bloody confrontation. Here's how these events unfolded. At 5:30 p.m. on February 21st, what would become a true nightmare for American tank crews began on Iwo Jima. Japanese artillery batteries, commanded by General Kuribayashi and cunningly camouflaged in cave shelters, suddenly unleashed a torrent of fire on the advancing flamethrower tanks. The general, after 2 days of meticulous analysis of the new American weaponry, had identified its Achilles heel: the vulnerable fuel systems. He understood that precise fire on these systems could lead to catastrophic consequences. His orders to the artillery commanders were clear: prioritize flamethrower tanks, use high explosive shells to penetrate fuel tanks, and provoke secondary explosions. This was a preemptive strike, and the Japanese were ready to counter. The very first salvo engulfed Lieutenant Lutz's tank as his vehicle approached a fortified ridge. Geysers of volcanic sand and steel shrapnel erupted into the sky, shaking the armored behemoth. Lutz felt every impact as Japanese gunners adjusted their fire with frightening accuracy onto his position. The armor of M4A3 tanks could withstand small arms fire and shrapnel, but a direct hit from a 75mm shell would penetrate the hull, instantly igniting the 400 gallons of napalm stored inside. Private Johnson, the driver, frantically maneuvered, dodging shells, while Lutz, through his periscope, tried to pinpoint the source of this deadly fire. The Japanese, like ghosts, masked their guns with volcanic ash and debris, making counter-battery fire almost impossible, even when muzzle flashes betrayed their locations. How could one survive such a meat grinder when the enemy was invisible and your vehicle was a walking bomb? The vulnerability of flamethrower tanks to artillery was known from training exercises, but real combat conditions proved far more brutal than any simulations could have predicted. Crews under fire lived with the constant threat that their vehicle could, at any moment, transform into a flaming inferno. This psychological stress surpassed anything they had experienced before. The realization that a single hit would turn their tank into a fireball affected combat effectiveness and tactical decision-making in ways no amount of preparation could account for. Lutz's crew maintained discipline, but the tension of operating a mobile bomb manifested in their nervous radio communications and hesitant movements. At any moment, their fate could be sealed by one shell, and this knowledge hung like a sword of Damocles over each man. Captain McVeigh, coordinating defensive actions from his command tank, directed conventional armored vehicles to suppress Japanese artillery, while the flamethrower tanks retreated to more protected positions. The tactical doctrine for flamethrower tanks did not anticipate protracted artillery duels. It was designed for rapid assaults on bunkers, followed by immediate withdrawal. The Japanese counterattack forced Marine commanders to adapt their tactics in the thick of battle, attempting to balance the need to protect vulnerable flamethrower vehicles with the imperative to maintain offensive momentum. McVeigh made a decision. The remaining 7 flamethrower tanks would operate in pairs. One vehicle would provide covering fire, while the other maneuvered to safety, creating a sort of endless hook for survival. However, even these desperate measures could not prevent tragedy. At 6:45 p.m., the first catastrophic loss occurred. A Japanese 105mm howitzer scored a direct hit on a flamethrower tank commanded by Sergeant Peters. The high explosive shell penetrated the side armor and detonated inside the fuel compartment, instantly igniting 400 gallons of napalm. The explosion was so powerful, it erupted into a fireball that soared 300 feet above the volcanic landscape, creating a mushroom cloud visible even from ships at sea. This was not merely an explosion. It was the destruction of 1/8 of the entire Marine Corps flamethrower tank fleet. The crew perished instantly, vaporized at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The psychological impact of Peter's death was enormous, spreading through the remaining tank crews. They realized that their machines, previously seemingly invulnerable, could at any moment be transformed into flaming crematories by just one accurate artillery shell. This loss also represented a significant tactical setback. Each destroyed flamethrower tank reduced the Marines' bunker-clearing capabilities by 12%. With only 7 machines remaining, commanders faced agonizing decisions regarding the risk-benefit ratio in upcoming operations. A weapon that had seemed unbeatable during its initial success now appeared fragile and vulnerable to cunning enemy countermeasures. How could the tide of this deadly dance be turned? Japanese artillery observers, having carefully studied the lessons of the first successful engagement, adjusted their fire. They now focused on the flamethrower tank's limited mobility and predictable approach routes to bunker targets. Battery commanders received detailed intelligence on the characteristics of American vehicles. Fuel capacity, armor thickness, and tactical procedures observed over the previous 2 days of fighting. This information allowed Japanese gunners to pre-establish kill zones along the most probable tank routes, creating overlapping fire traps capable of hitting flamethrower tanks at their most vulnerable moments. It was a strategy designed with diabolical precision. Lieutenant Lutz's tank managed to survive this artillery barrage by masterfully utilizing terrain features that masked its movement from Japanese observers. Iwo Jima's volcanic landscape, full of natural cover, allowed tanks to hide between assault runs. Yet, these same shelters channeled movement along predictable routes that enemy artillery could pre-range for rapid engagement. The tactical problem of protecting flamethrower tanks while preserving their offensive capability demanded creative solutions that conventional armored doctrine simply did not provide. Lutz coordinated his actions with infantry smoke teams, creating visual concealment during approach phases, which significantly reduced the effectiveness of Japanese observation posts. But even if enemy fire could be avoided, a new, equally serious threat loomed on the horizon. A fuel supply crisis became a secondary, but no less acute, problem that threatened to paralyze flamethrower tank operations even without combat losses. Each vehicle consumed an average of 60 gallons of napalm per hour during active operations, completely depleting its 400-gallon capacity in just 7 hours of continuous combat. The logistical chain required to sustain such fuel reserves exceeded the capabilities of existing shore support facilities. This forced engineers to establish forward fuel depots literally under enemy fire. The specialized nature of napalm fuel also created additional handling difficulties. as this thickened gasoline mixture required constant heating to maintain proper fluidity in cold weather conditions. Thus, in addition to deadly enemy fire, American forces had to contend with a logistical nightmare that could halt their advance as effectively as Japanese shells. Imagine the scene. A biting wind pierces to the bone, and all around are only ash and the echoes of recent explosions. In such conditions, where every rustle seems to herald disaster, events unfolded that changed the course of one of World War II's most brutal battles. Today, we delve into a history where human resilience and engineering ingenuity clashed in a deadly struggle, and we'll examine how innovations on the battlefield became both salvation and a curse. How did the crews cope with the constant fear of being incinerated by their own weapon? What unexpected countermeasures did Japanese engineers develop to neutralize the seemingly all-powerful flamethrower tanks? And why, despite technological superiority, did the initial successes of American forces turn into a protracted standoff? As we explore these questions, consider the intricate details that reveal the true picture of war. In that chilling atmosphere, Sergeant Martinez took on the heavy burden of commanding the second flamethrower tank. His predecessor, Peters, had perished in a fireball, leaving behind a crew who had witnessed firsthand their lead vehicle transform into unrecognizable wreckage. The psychological pressure of using a weapon capable of instantly turning them to ash weighed heavily on combat effectiveness. Reaction times slowed, and intra-crew coordination deteriorated under the constant stress. Martinez, understanding the gravity of the situation, implemented a crew rotation system. He aimed to prevent psychological breakdown, ensuring that no individual remained at peak stress for too long during combat operations. This was not merely a tactical move, but a profound understanding of the human psyche in wartime. Meanwhile, the Japanese were not idle. Engineers under Kuribayashi demonstrated astonishing adaptability, developing countermeasures specifically designed to repel flamethrower attacks. Bunkers were equipped with water spray systems capable of extinguishing napalm fires. Ventilation was improved, reducing the effectiveness of flame penetration, and structural modifications diverted liquid fuel away from the most vulnerable areas. Of course, due to limited resources, these modifications could not be implemented universally. However, they were testament to systematic efforts to neutralize the American flamethrower advantage not through tactical maneuvers, but through engineering solutions. Combat engineers from the 5th Marine Division, in turn, recognized that mechanical failures posed no less a threat to specialized vehicles than enemy actions. Repair bases were deployed behind the front lines to service the remaining flamethrower tanks. The flame projection systems required constant attention, as the corrosive effects of napalm on metal components and the high pressure in the fuel delivery system took their toll. Technical specialists worked tirelessly to keep the tanks combat-ready, often performing repairs directly under artillery fire, as Japanese gunners spared no auxiliary facilities. By February 23rd, a tactical stalemate had emerged, reflecting both sides' adaptation to the new battlefield conditions. Japanese forces had learned to counter flamethrower attacks through improved marksmanship and defensive modifications. Marine commanders struggled to protect their vulnerable flamethrower tanks without sacrificing their offensive capability. The initial breakthrough which had seemed to herald a swift victory, had devolved into a war of attrition that favored the defenders, who possessed prepared positions and internal lines of communication. The 8 experimental weapons that had altered the initial phase of the battle now represented a diminishing asset that required careful handling for critically important operations. McVeigh received orders to preserve the remaining tanks for the final assault on Mount Suribachi. He understood that the specialized capabilities of these machines would be essential for capturing the fortress complex that crowned Iwo Jima's southern peak. The decision to withdraw flamethrower tanks from general bunker clearing operations reflected the harsh lessons learned about vulnerability and resilience in prolonged combat. A weapon that initially seemed like an easy solution to tactical problems proved to require as much meticulous planning and resource management as conventional systems, but with the added complexity of extreme vulnerability to enemy countermeasures. The assault on Mount Suribachi began at 06 on March 10th. 5 surviving flamethrower tanks spearheaded the final push on Kuribayashi's command complex. The volcanic peak, rising 554 feet above the battlefield, was honeycombed with tunnels and chambers that had taken 8 months to construct. Intelligence suggested that 3,000 Japanese defenders remained within the mountain fortress, sheltered behind 15 feet of solid rock and concrete barriers, capable of withstanding direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. Captain McVeigh positioned his tanks in a semicircle at the base of the mountain, coordinating with artillery observers to identify cave entrances that required flamethrower engagement. Lutz's tank approached the main tunnel entrance on the mountain's eastern slope, where a 75mm anti-tank gun had held off infantry attacks for 3 days. The cave entrance was protected by a 6-inch thick steel door with firing slits, allowing the gun crew to engage targets while remaining shielded from return fire. Conventional explosives had failed to breach the entrance, and infantry attempts to approach the position had resulted in heavy casualties from supporting machine gun nests located higher on the slopes. The flamethrower tank represented the only weapon system capable of neutralizing this position without prohibitive losses. The approach route to the cave entrance crossed 800 yards of open ground, swept by overlapping fields of fire from multiple defensive positions. Japanese observers in the caves higher up the mountain could adjust artillery fire on any vehicle attempting to reach the anti-tank gun position, creating a kill zone that had claimed 2 conventional tanks during previous assault attempts. Lutz coordinated his actions with smoke teams to create visual concealment, while artillery batteries fired white phosphorus shells to obscure his tank's movement across the open terrain. The steel door protecting the cave entrance was manufactured at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal and shipped to Iwo Jima in pieces during the defensive preparation phase. The barrier weighed 12 tons and was designed to withstand explosive charges of up to 500 pounds. With internal reinforcement that distributed impact effects throughout the structure. Japanese engineers calculated that American forces lacked the specialized equipment needed to overcome such massive obstacles, making the cave positions virtually invulnerable to conventional assault. They did not consider the possibility that liquid fire could flow through firing slits like hot water. Imagine standing before an impregnable wall, seemingly impossible to breach. Every step is met with fierce resistance, every attempted assault turning into a catastrophe. This sense of futility, where a task appears insurmountable and the adversary invincible, can be overwhelming. But what if even the most desperate situations can be overcome with unexpected solutions? Here, we delve into one of the most brutal yet ingenious episodes of World War II, where a burning inferno became the key to victory. We will uncover 3 tactical techniques that transformed seemingly invulnerable fortifications into flaming traps. And the first, most shocking of these, is about to unfold. On Iwo Jima, in the very crucible of the Pacific War, Private Johnson skillfully maneuvered Lutz's 37-ton tank across the cratered terrain. His actions were surgical. Every pile of debris, every shell crater became a temporary cover. Yet the pace of movement remained high to minimize time under enemy fire. The colossal mass of the vehicle kicked up clouds of volcanic dust, which, on one hand, provided partial concealment, but on the other, inevitably revealed its position to Japanese observers equipped with powerful optics. Soon, fountains of black sand and steel shrapnel began to erupt around the tank. Japanese artillerymen, like relentless hunters, attempted to bracket their target, sending a hail of shells along its path. When only 100 yards remained to the cave entrance, Commander Lutz ordered the gunner to prepare for a fiery salvo. The tank, meanwhile, was taking an ideal position for the attack. In Lutz's periscope, the massive steel door loomed, scarred by bullet impacts and shrapnel, a testament to previous, unsuccessful assaults. The firing slits, barely discernible as dark apertures in the impenetrable barrier, were the key to success. Thanks to precise intelligence and photographic reconnaissance, their dimensions and placement were known, allowing for incredibly accurate targeting. The napalm stream was intended to penetrate these narrow gaps, reach the interior, and there, in the confined space, ignite ammunition, destroying the gun crew with unbearable heat and toxic gases. As we continue to explore these critical details that shape the true picture of war, consider the profound impact of such moments on those who lived through them. 12 seconds. Just 12 seconds lasted this fiery torrent, unleashing 200 gallons of napalm directly onto the fortification entrance. The burning mass, like liquid lightning, struck the steel barrier and poured through the firing slits, instantly transforming the inner chamber into a blazing hell. Temperatures inside soared to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The anti-tank gun crew perished in a matter of moments, suffocated by superheated gases that scorched their lungs, giving them no chance to reach the emergency exit. The formidable 75mm gun, which had long controlled the eastern approach, was now silent, its barrel glowing red in the inferno that consumed its position. Thus, thanks to this devastating strike, a breach was created in Kuribayashi's defensive perimeter, opening the path for infantry companies to the mountain's base. As Captain Shoup led his Marines through the newly formed breach, using the charred rocks as cover, they advanced towards secondary cave entrances, where machine gun nests and mortar teams were hidden. The sheer sight of their seemingly impregnable defensive position being consumed by a flaming hell had a devastating psychological effect on the Japanese soldiers. Many defenders in auxiliary posts, demoralized and unwilling to share the fate of their comrades, abandoned their positions. Meanwhile, McVeigh, assessing the situation, directed the remaining 4 tanks to the cave complexes located on the northern and western slopes of the mountain. There, Japanese forces had established an intricate system of overlapping fields of fire that controlled all routes to the summit. Although these positions were smaller than the main tunnel complex, they were no less reliably protected by robust concrete barriers and steel doors, preventing direct access. The flamethrower tanks would have to operate autonomously in these conditions, as the complex terrain precluded mutual support between vehicles and severely limited artillery support due to excessively steep angles. Sergeant Martinez, commanding the second flamethrower tank, took on the assault of a machine gun nest masterfully carved into the rock 300 feet above sea level. This position posed a serious threat, providing an unobstructed view of the entire western beach area and continuously shelling landing operations for 2 weeks. Any infantry attempts to storm this cave had failed due to the extremely steep approach and intense fire from adjacent fortifications. The flamethrower tank remained the only effective way to neutralize this threat without unacceptable casualties among the assault units. The cave, concealing a machine gun nest, was a testament to Japanese engineering genius. They applied mining technologies, honed during their time in Manchuria, to create a complex labyrinth of chambers extending 60 feet deep into solid rock. The entrance to this fortification was protected by a massive concrete barrier with an 18-inch wide embrasure. Through this narrow slit, the machine gun could fire upon targets while remaining impervious to return fire. The inner walls of the chamber were lined with steel plates to prevent collapses and, crucially, to create an airtight space capable of containing flames and poisonous gases for extended periods, intensifying their destructive effect. Martinez, demonstrating exceptional ingenuity, positioned his tank on a narrow ledge carved directly into the mountainside. Utilizing the vehicle's complex hydraulic stabilization system, he achieved the precision necessary to fire upwards at a 45-degree angle. The flamethrower's elevation mechanism had been specially modified for such extreme conditions, but the laws of physics governing the projection of liquid fuel at a steep angle still posed significant accuracy challenges that even the most rigorous training had not fully overcome. Now, the stream of napalm had to arc through the air like an artillery shell before descending upon the tiny cave entrance with enough force to breach it and penetrate inside. A brilliant flash of flame arced into the morning sky, precisely following the calculated ballistic trajectory. Its destructive path ended directly at the cave's entrance. The napalm surged through the embrasure, instantly filling the chamber with burning liquid that adhered to every surface, creating an unbearable inferno that literally consumed all life-sustaining oxygen. The machine gun crew perished instantly, and 20 rounds, detonating in secondary fires, illuminated the cave's interior, turning it into a scorching furnace. Thus, the position controlling all western approaches to Mount Suribachi was completely neutralized in just 15 seconds of fiery storm. By noon on March 10th, 5 flamethrower tanks operating with methodical brutality had destroyed 47 cave positions, bunkers, and defensive strongholds that had previously formed the backbone of Japanese resistance on Mount Suribachi. This systematic and relentless destruction created critical breaches in the defensive perimeter. allowing infantry companies to advance towards the mountain's summit. The psychological impact of these attacks significantly surpassed their tactical damage, as Japanese defenders watched in horror as their most reliable fortifications were engulfed by a weapon against which they could find no effective defense. But this was not all. The main challenge still awaited them. The final assault on General Kuribayashi's command bunker required unprecedented coordination from all 5 remaining flamethrower tanks. Their target was a heavily fortified chamber buried 50 feet directly beneath the mountain's summit. This position was conceived as an impregnable citadel, with 10-foot thick concrete walls and a complex network of escape routes connected to the mountain's entire tunnel system. Intelligence reported that Kuribayashi himself remained in this chamber, directing Iwo Jima's final desperate defense from a sanctuary he genuinely believed to be absolutely invulnerable. Would they succeed in breaching this seemingly insurmountable barrier? Many authors, much like ancient generals, feel that their content is doomed to oblivion, and their ideas, however valuable, cannot penetrate the wall of indifference. They pour their soul, time, and resources into their work, but the audience slips away like sand through fingers, leaving only the bitter aftertaste of unfulfilled ambitions. Do you recognize this feeling? Have you ever felt a potentially great video lose its audience in the very first seconds? What if we told you there's a method capable of transforming this impregnable fortress of viewer attention into an open door? Today, we will unveil the secrets of scripts that not only hold but consume audience attention from the very first moments, turning fleeting interest into deep immersion. We ourselves, like you, once faced this invisible wall when it seemed no effort could retain fleeting attention. But by analyzing countless data and experimenting with hundreds of approaches, we were able to find the levers that transform an ordinary video into a magnet for viewers. How can you ensure that over 70% of viewers stay with you throughout the entire first minute, when every second counts? How can you create not just a video, but a cohesive narrative that is impossible to tear away from? Many believe that success lies in shocking headlines or grand promises. But the truth, as is often the case, is much deeper and more paradoxical. We will show that real power lies not in superficial tricks, but in the art of constructing an irresistible narrative that breaks habitual patterns of perception. In this video are 3 fundamental principles that are guaranteed to rivet eyes to your screen, and the first of them is about to be revealed. Stay with us and watch until the end, for every moment of this narrative is filled with invaluable discoveries. We would be especially grateful for your like and subscription. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching our story from. So we've already touched upon the fundamentals for capturing attention from the first seconds. But what happens when that initial impulse begins to wane? How do you maintain the tension, the intrigue that was so carefully built at the beginning? This is where a concept we call the infinite hook comes into play. Not just a technique, but an entire philosophy of narrative construction, where each part of the video becomes an integral link in a chain of continuous interest. It's like ancient architecture, where one stone holds another, creating a monumental and unbroken structure. Its principle of operation is simple yet brilliant. Within each semantic block of your video lies a subtle, almost imperceptible hint of what will be revealed next. The viewer should not feel abrupt transitions or see the beginning of a new section. For them, it is always a single, smoothly developing story where one thought naturally flows into another, and each answer generates a new, even more intriguing question. All these internal blocks exist only on paper, for you, the script architect, to maintain structure. But for the viewer, they merge into a single, captivating flow that is impossible to interrupt, for it constantly promises new discovery. Much like the path to the summit of Mount Suribachi revealed new, defensive lines, until complete victory over indifference was achieved.